How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew. This is Lemora's Cards, and today... Why'd I do it like that? And today we're going to be talking about Bloomburrow. I don't usually do set reviews, but it's kind of seeming like the power level is just going up and up and up, and they're just putting anything they want on a Magic card nowadays. So even more and more often, it feels like we're going to be getting cEDH relevant cards. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about. Varying from, okay, you should expect to see this in games, like literally 4 and 5 color deck staple, that level of card, and then stuff that I think is just straight up bait, and I'm basically going to warn you like, hey, yeah, this could do something, but probably shouldn't. Probably leave that one at home unless you just really love that it's a little derpy animal. Let me know down below which of these Bloomburrow cards is your favorite. Do this video, like, comment, subscribe, helps me out a whole lot. I might even be at 10K by the time you watch this, so thank you so much for your support. You can also support me over on Patreon, patreon.com/LemorasCards. Get access to coaching, deck advice, stuff like that. All that being said, we do actually have one more thing that I think some of you might be really excited to see. Take a look. I've partnered with Aaron Miller to promote the Kraumbat Kickstarter, featuring the first official Kraum playmat and including gilded foil designs. Alongside the Kraumbat playmat, there's many options for add-ons like additional playmat designs and these foil tokens, as well as normal or foil signature. This design will only be available for a limited time, so get yours now at the Kickstarter link in the description below. All right, let's take a look at some Bloomburrow cards. First up, let's take a look at one that has been maybe sneakily powerful. People are starting to realize that it's actually very good, and that's Mockingbird. This is X and a blue for a 1/1 bird bard. Flying, you may have it enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it's a bird in addition to other types and it has flying. This is a new clone. I always call this a clone meta. Creatures are abundant and Dockside Extortionists are wrecking every single game of Magic, at least of cEDH. So what does Mockingbird do different? The text is a little weird. It's very notable that Mockingbird doesn't actually care about the X cost. It cares about the total mana spent. That's what the X is there for. If you spend X equals 1, so 1 generic mana and a blue, it's basically a Phantasmal Image for creatures that cost 2 or less. So for 2 mana, it is a Dockside clone. It is a Fimage with no downside. It literally has an upside that it gets to be a flyer. The downside is, if I want to copy a Tivit or a Consphinx or some other big thing like a Crom, I have to spend the full mana. But there's some other upsides. It's a one-off of Ad Nauseam. Pretty nice. One of the biggest things with this card, one of the crazier synergies, is that this is tutorable off of Ranger Captain of Eos, which is why you're probably going to see this over Phantasmal Image starting to pop up in more of the Temnocrom decks, or really 4 or 5 color whatever piles that are blue and white that run Ranger Captain. It's very frequently been the case where Ranger Captain can only get Ragavan or Esper Sentinel, but now you have like the flexibility of, okay, I have 6 mana, let's get 2 Ranger Captains. Just one searches up the other. Let's get Ranger Captain, crack it immediately, copy a Dockside with what it searched up for. That's really big. That sounds cutesy, it is not. That is very relevant on a very powerful card in the format already. Will be worse than Fimage in some scenarios, and you will have to think about it. It's significantly worse in the Simic creature tutor decks, but those decks are mainly running Flesh Duplicate at this point anyways. Not going to show up in those kind of decks, but will in these, again, like Ranger Captain decks. And this is a card you will see in cEDH going forward. Next up, we have Zinnia, Valley's Voice. This is one that got a lot of excitement when it was revealed. It is Jeskai. So for blue, red, white, you get a legendary creature bird bard 1/3 flyer. Gets +X/+0, where X is the number of other creatures you control with base power 1. And then creature spells you cast have offspring 2, which means you may pay an additional 2 as you cast a creature spell. If you do, when that creature enters, create a 1/1 token copy of it. It does enable some combo-y elements, but from what I've seen of the Zinnia builds that people have been working on, it is really mostly going to be value oriented. It's going to, what's the obvious thing, guys? Say the line, Bart. It makes you another Dockside. It copies a Dockside. We know that's good. You can copy other things relevant too, right? Your other creatures, you have the mana lying around. 2 Grand Abolishers is better than 1, right? Ranger Captains, whatever. It works really well with things like Imperial Recruiter and Recruiter of the Guard, but it doesn't really enable combos. There's a couple, like with Shrieking Drake and Dockside, you can bounce and create infinite mana. Typically, commanders that enable enable an infinite combo but don't make an outlet for it can be kind of awkward. With the Imperial Recruiter thing, you're pretty likely to be able to set up something where I like double Dockside, double Imp Recruiter, get my combo piece of like Shrieking Drake and then like a Walking Ballista or something, and then you're able to bounce in multi-tutor and set up something. But it is very mana intensive, and depending on Dockside count, it's all over the place. And also, this is a 3 mana commander in 3 colors that cannot really use Jeweled Lotus, which is a downside I usually mention. I think it's got some stuff going for it. I don't expect it to be the strongest option, but it is a new one that I think will be attractive to people and does enable some cool stuff. It will be fun. This is obviously worse than like Tymna Kraum. I don't have to tell you that, right? I'll probably have a link in the description to a deck list for Zinnia. Hard to say what the list will end up looking like if people continue to play this deck, but it does let you do some cool stuff, and I think it's one that people will have a lot of fun with. Hazel's Brewmaster. This is a cool one. 3 and a black, creature, Squirrel Warlock, 3/4, menace. When it enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and create a food token. Foods you control have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Hazel's Brewmaster. So it's a little bit of that Agatha's Soul Cauldron type action. It's a little different though. So 1, 4 mana. That's a lot more. 2, creature. That's a lot easier to resolve. So one of the cooler things that this lets you do that doesn't really work with Soul Cauldron is comboing with things like Devoted Druid, because you're giving this ability to food tokens, their artifacts. It's very easy to throw on something like that just ignores the whole creature thing, basically working the same way Swift Reconfiguration or Machine God's Effigy works with Devoted Druid, where it's just a pure artifact. It doesn't die with those -1/-1 counters. It gets both of those abilities, taps and add green, -1/-1, get infinite green mana, pop, 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 we're doing the thing. Also, I would say that food tokens are a little bit harder to deal with than something like a creature. You don't have to worry about it getting Swords to Plowshares. They also inherently don't have Summoning Sickness, which lines up really well with like making foods and turning them into Bloom Tenders and stuff like that, right? I don't think I expect to see as much play as like Soul Cauldron, which comes down a lot cheaper, but this does offer some new options. If there are decks, especially in lower colors like Golgari or Sultai, that are doing that kind of thing, you can look in this direction for another option. Pretty cool stuff. Get a food token that's a Hermit Druid, stuff like that. Festival of Embers, 4 and a red, enchantment. During your turn, you may cast instant sorcery spells from your graveyard by paying 1 life in addition to their other cost. If a card or token would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead, and you can pay 1 and a red to sacrifice it. This one I kind of think is bait. I do expect to see it show up in the decks that were already running things like Aston Flames. It's pretty cool that you can also develop this and pass and reasonably expect to untap with it. It's also pretty cool you can shut off that downside. You can even do things like resolve some spells, Festival of Embers, cast some rituals, let those go to exile, cast a new spell from the yard that you don't want to go in exile, and then with it on the stack, hold priority, sacrifice Festival of Embers if that comes up. Maybe you're like breaching and you're trying to set up a breach line and then you want to sack this festival to get going. So I do think there's absolutely some cool stuff with it. It's a really cool card. It's evocative of like Yawgmoth's Will and Past in Flames and Underworld Breach, which are all really cool, exciting cards that are super fun to play with. If you're in more than 2 colors, I have a very hard time seeing this making sense for your deck. You can maybe expect this in maybe some kind of Rakdos Storm or especially the mono red decks. It will pop up. It's just unlikely to pop up in the most competitive list right now. This is a fun one with a fun name, Pollywog Prodigy. 1 in a blue frog wizard, 1/3 with Evolve, which is when a creature you control enters. If it has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it, on this creature. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than Pollywog Prodigy's power, draw a card. Reason I emphasize that is I saw people talking about this card online and reading it completely wrong. It is not less than or equal to, none of that. It is less than. So when you play this thing, 0 drops are what triggers it. Chrome Moxes, Mox Diamonds, Mana Crypts. When you get that first Evolve trigger, then 1 drops and 0 drops. Now your Vamp Tutors and Swords to Plowshares, those trigger it. How many cards this thing will actually draw in a game is a little hard to evaluate. Getting it out on the play is probably pretty good, but I don't have the highest hopes in the world for it. It is probably going to make a lot of sense in certain decks, but I'm seeing people talk about it in like Tymna Kraum. It seems kind of iffy there. Like people are saying like, okay, turn 1 this, turn 2 Tymna Evolve trigger, turn 3 Kraum Evolve trigger. I don't expect to do 2-drop Tymna Kraum and then live really right now in most games. I mean, if it's very stacksy environment or super mid-range grindy, there's a million engines in play, maybe. I don't know how many cards this will draw in that environment too. So it really is just going to come down to testing. I have a hard time giving this like a hard number rating. I can't imagine it being worse than like a 6 because it will reasonably draw cards off things people cast. But if it's going to draw more than Archivist of Ogma, Esper Sentinel, it's kind of hard to say. I expect it will, but maybe not the turn it comes down. Yeah, blue is getting a lot from this set. It's the rich get richer, I tell you what. For a blue, into the Flood Maw. Instant, gift a tapped fish. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss line, but it is magic text, I promise. Basically, you give an opponent a 1/1 fish. If you want, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. If the gift was promise, if I gave you a fish, or somebody a fish, instead return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So this is really kind of slotting in for some people in the Psych Rift sort of slot. Very notably, cannot bounce your own dockside, which is the first thing everybody's trying to do with any bounce spell, right? Where people are playing Alchemist Retrieval just for that. And then, I can pay a little bit extra and get a baby rift. There's discussion, on like if you need the big Psych Rift effect. I personally like in slower decks, more mid-rangey decks in general, having that kind of emergency escape button, slam the button to eject. But it is very nice to just have 1 mana return something an opponent controls straight up, instant speed, and all I have to do is give a 1/1. Giving a 1/1 is relevant. I talked about this with Forbidden Orchard recently. Basically every deck can use a 1/1, but it's a pretty negligible downside for this card. I think it's pretty good. If it will end up being like a staple in even high color blue decks, a little hard to say, but I do think this is very much cEDH playable. I expect to see it. I think you could reasonably expect this to kind of slot in anywhere. It's not really built for a specific deck. It's really just a call on what your slots are looking like and what kind of things you're expecting to play against. Use the link in the description below to download Whatnot, and you'll get $15 to use to buy Magic singles, sealed product, get anything that you want really. There's no limits. You just get $15 on the account for free just for signing up. Use the link in the description below. Give Whatnot a try. Cruelclaw's Heist. Black. Sorcery. Gift a card. So an opponent draws a card. You pick it. You get to pick. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. Exile that card. If the gift was promised, you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. So it's kind of like a Thoughtseize Duress meets Praetor's Grasp type thing. I very much expect to only see this in the low color black decks. I don't think it's really that great. I think 1 mana off of a Praetor's Grasp that gives you way less selection. Kind of a tough ask in the current format. Seems pretty hot and crick you get for free, but seems a little aspirational. I mean, people were calling the apple cope, and that's when you can develop for twice the mana. You can, like all colorless, you can develop that and then sit on it and wait to use it and get an entire handful of cards versus the one best one. It seems really on the fence to me. Next up, we got Coruscation Mage. Not a word I'm familiar with. 1 and a red, 2/2 Otter Wizard with Offspring 2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Who wants this? Ob Nixilis, baby. This one's pretty niche, but this is a straight upgrade to some cards that Ob Nixilis has been running that are like a 2/1 with this effect, but you can get 2 of these. I can spend 4 mana for this, and then every non-creature spell I cast, I get 2 Ob triggers. So cast a Lotus Petal, 2 Ob triggers, get 2 cards. Again, this one is more niche. You might also see it too in like, I don't know, some of the Pinger or Brass decks that I've covered in top 16 at least. The red O'Hare, something like that. Don't expect to see it much of anywhere else, but this is like such a new staple in a deck that I at least enjoy talking about and think has potential. And it's when that just is such a slam dunk in that deck. Here's one that I was really excited about when it first got revealed. That's Valley Floodcaller, which is 2 and a blue for an Otter Wizard, 2/2 Flash. You may cast non-creature spells as though they had Flash. Pretty exciting. And then there's other text, but whenever you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats you control get +1/+1 till end of turn, untap them. That will come up occasionally. Your Birds of Paradise. This thing untapping could be relevant in like a Springleaf Drum, whatever kind of deck. Like, for instance, this card is a consideration like Roxai. Born Upon a Wind is already one of the better cards, really in the format, at least in terms of newer, non-like mega bust, ignoring like your Mana Crypts and your Dockside Extortionists and stuff like that. That's really changed the way that people can play. And this is an effect like that you can develop at a pretty good rate that I think the numbers line up just well enough that it is a consideration. This lets you do an entire breach line in your instep with Necropotence. And it's especially cool too because you can hold up mana to develop it, or maybe you're holding up a counter spell or something, and depending on the deck. Deploy this and untap Necropotence, for a bunch. But it is really nice being able to do the mana investment into a Born Upon a Wind type effect, even though it is going to be a little bit more expensive for what you get. And then maybe that other upside comes up too every now and then. Next up, we got the Infamous Cruelclaw. 1 black-red, legendary creature, Weasel Mercenary. That means he's an outlaw. 3/3 menace. Whenever the Infamous Cruelclaw deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. I'm going to say it. Nobody's going to like me for hating on the Weasel. This one's bait, guys. This is bait. It's 3 mana. It doesn't even do anything the turn I cast it, dude. My 3 mana commander that I'm building my deck around. Yeah, you know, I can imp seal whatever, scheming symmetry, and pop off. But like, I have to have this thing in play, get to my next turn, get to attack and get in with it, which seems decently likely to happen. 3/3 with menace, probably going to get in. And then ideally have a top deck tutor, which is, if you do in all this resolves, probably wins you the game. But if you don't, I'm going card negative for the top deck tutor. I'm going card negative to discard to even attempt to cast the non-land card I've exiled. And if it's random, it's gonna suck. It could be okay. We'll see, I guess, but I don't know. And in Rakdos, you're in pretty proactive colors, so like you're probably gonna build your deck in a way that like lines up really well with this type of effect. You're building in a way where like Bolus the Citadel is gonna be really hot in your deck, even though it might not be the go-to card. It's really gonna be Peering to the Abyss. I think this one is just a little too cutesy for its own good. We've got Lilysplash Mentor, which is the new Emil at home. This is 4 mana, 2 green blue, Frog Druid, 4/4, Reach. 1 green blue, exile another target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it, activate only as a sorcery. Very similar to Emil the Blessed, especially with its interaction with like Dockside Extortionist. It's 3 mana, flicker Dockside. Dockside counts 4 or more. I get to win the game. I get infinite mana. I do whatever I want. There's a few differences, completely different colors. It's Simic versus Selesnya, which means it's more likely to get to show up in like a Thrasios deck. People were definitely tagging me about this one on Rock Thras. And then the activate only as a sorcery is not a clause that's on Emil. It is a downside. That is a negative. You are correct in your assessment, but I think that comes up less often than the other options that we have for creature bouncers or dockside combo cards. It's way more often that like Baron or Temur Sabertooth just have the issue of dockside count is too low. That will come up more than the, hey, I need to win at instant speed with this thing, which will come up, but way less often than like, oh, the Baron, the dockside count has to be 50 or something, and it's a 1/1. 4 is a pretty low bar to clear, and I think this option for those decks that don't have access to Emil is just a nice effect compared to like Temur Sabertooth or Baron or whatever, because activating this thing and just targeting Spellseeker, Imp Recruiter, whatever, any random value creature is just pretty good. Can't even expect to possibly see it in like Nadu as like, hey, use this on my Trinket Mage or whatever, flicker my Nadu. And it does seem like, oh, well, this is just worse than Displacer Kitten. It's not like Nadu's running 50 million spells that they can jam non-creatures over and over and over with Displacer Kitten. So I do think there is some merit to this. Maybe not as being better than Kitten, but as being more self-contained, just having its own kind of utility, you know? We got Baylen the Haymaker, which is a Naya Bunny, legendary creature rabbit warrior for red, green, white. You get a 4/3, tap 2 untapped tokens you control, add 1 mana of any color, tap 3 untapped tokens you control, draw a card, tap 4 untapped tokens you control, put 3 +1/+1 counters on Baylen the Haymaker. It gains trample until end of turn. Guys, I kind of think this is bait. As a card in a deck like Najeela, surely at some point we have to stop. We have to evaluate our mana cost in a 5-color deck and think about, can we really cast this Naya Bunny? Maybe we can. It will do pretty cool things in Najeela. I see it. It's a warrior. That's all lining up great. Now, this as a commander seems a little iffy to me because there aren't that many good things that make tokens, especially like a really fast rate. And if you're running things that are making like token creatures, like trying to do something like Jetmir would do, sure, you can probably get decent value out of this commander, but you're really warping your deck around cards that people aren't playing, and I don't think you're getting to a point that makes it worth it. I don't really see this thing having a ton of merit as a cEDH commander, which, to be honest, not a lot of Naya options do at the moment. It does do something unique. You might see it in Najeela. There's a couple other bunnies and whatever warriors in this set you might see, but like, it looks pretty cool. Then we got Flubs the Fool. This guy's my boy. So for Temur, green, blue, red, they're really liking the just one of each color, 3-color commanders. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. You also get a 0/5 body. Good luck bowmastering that boy. Actually, probably can bowmaster him because of his effect. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, draw a card if you have no cards in hand. Otherwise, discard a card. there's some things that stand out. You can do infinite loops and draw through your deck with them. That's kind of cool. You can do like food chain stuff with them. You can enable some wild stuff. A lot of times it will require doing a whole bunch of game actions and looting through your deck, or doing some weird hold priority shenanigans and then getting rid of flubs so you don't deck yourself at the very end. I think the Albuquerque area, they were kind of really like, Ken Bauman is kind of like really hyping up a flubs build that is incredibly all in with like no counter spells and just trying to turbo it out. Whether that will be good or not, it's hard to say, but it is incredibly cool. You can check out that list, which already has a pretty detailed primer to get more of an idea of Flubs the Fool. Also, he's just pretty sick. Like, this is just a cool guy. Next, we got Bloodroot Apothecary, 2 and a green for a Squirrel Druid 3/3 Toxic 2. When it enters, you and target opponent each create a treasure token. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-creature token, that player gets 2 poison counters. Oh my god, we did it, guys. We finally shut down Dockside with my 3 mana creature that makes a treasure. I also think this one's bait. If you are in the lowest of color decks, sure. This card is kind of competing with a card like Manglehorn or Collector Oof, Viridian Revel even, though it's a little bit different in function. I don't expect this one to quite get there. It will be intimidating for dedicated Dockside decks to deal with it, but if they're not a truly dedicated Dockside deck, I think they're just going to figure something out. Also, the ability to just win on top of the triggers, I think will come up a lot. Also, the fact that I have to crack 5 for you to kill me, like it doesn't matter if I crack 4 and then win. I don't think it's quite going to get there. I think the other options to punish these sort of effects are going to be more useful in general, are going to provide better utility. It will mess you up in some pods, but I think people are going to put this down and have it work well one time and then just be convinced to run this card forever when they're probably better suited on some other similar effect. Next up, we got Mr. Foxglove, 2 green, white, blue for a legendary creature Fox Road 3/5 lifelink. When it attacks, draw cards equal to the number of cards in defending player's hand minus the number of cards in your hand. If you didn't draw cards this way, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. It's a 5 mana commander that doesn't do anything unless it attacks. It's not great, right? Kind of awkward that you have to draw cards if the difference works out for that. Although you can always attack somebody where it doesn't. But like the fact that you can't choose not to draw the cards and just put a creature into play is a little bit worse. I think this guy is just awkward. He looks cool, seems fun. People will probably try him out. There's very little going on in Bant right now. Maybe you'll see it every now and then. It'll be a fun option for people to have. But like most of the Bant decks right now, I don't think it's going to be any more than that. Then we got Kitsa Otterball Elite, 1 and a blue, legendary creature Otter Wizard, 1/3 with Vigilance, Prowess, tap, draw, discard, 2 tap, copy target instant or sorcery you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, activate only if Kitsa's power is 3 or greater. It is one in many a line of Dramatic Reversal decks. This one notably can just combo with Dramatic Reversal itself. Your Dramatic Reversal's netting you some mana. You can Kitsa, tap, copy target instant or sorcery you control, copy the Dramatic Reversal, untap it, blah, blah, blah. But it's mono blue. Stella Lee just came out. Maybe before Stella Lee came out, this would have attracted some people. But like, man, Stella Lee just does this whole thing. But with a whole extra color, one of the best colors, can combo with like way more things. Now, let me know down below if you think there's any big ones I missed. It's a big world of Magic cards out there. There's 6 sets dropping every week. I basically missed this reveal season just because it seemed like it happened so fast. And it was also MH3, boom, Assassin's Creed's here, boom, this set is here. I could not keep up. So let me know which cards out of this set do you think are going to have the biggest impact? Which one's your favorite? Personally, I'm probably voting for Mockingbird as the card you should expect to see the most out of. Maybe Valley, Floodcaller, or especially Pollywog Prodigy. Those will be popping up in a lot of blue decks, but you never know. We'll see. And thank you so much for watching. And as always, go play cEDH. Have a good one, everybody.